What is up, everyone? Welcome back to even more Muv-Luv photonflowers. In the previous recording session, we went through Rain Dancers, which kind of seemed like a very pointless story. Maybe it'll make sense later, I don't know, but for now it didn't really make a whole lot of sense why that was a thing. But then we also went through Confessions, which took up the vast majority of the last recording session, and that was phenomenal. I love Confessions. Confessions was great. So anyway, we're back at the timeline, as you see at the top here. 1996 is when the events of Confessions took place. So let's continue reading down our timeline. Later in 1996, Project Prominence began. That must be something that's referenced in one of these later episodes, because I don't remember that from the main story. In 1997, in Japan, Takamura Yui enlists at the Yamayori Women's Training Academy. Once again, I'm assuming that's a character in one of these later episodes, because I don't recognize the name. In 1998, in Japan, Operation Gwangju, the IJF assists UN and Koshan forces in withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula. Lieutenant General Ayamine held responsible for countless UN casualties. Yeah, okay. So that was when Ayamine's dad's whatnot stuff happened. Later that year, Hayase, Mitsuki, Suzumi Haruka, and Narumi Takayuki enlist at the now defunct Imperial Training Academy. Also later that year, the Beta invade the Japanese mainland. Also the defense of Kyoto. Also the defense of Niigata. Also that year in the U.S., the U.S. unilaterally terminates Japan-U.S. security treaty and withdraws troops from Japan. Yikes. Also later that year, the Imperial Diet passes the bill lowering conscription age for women to 16. Oof. In 1999, Narumi Takayuki was assigned to A01. Oh, that's right. He did graduate before Haruka and Hayase. I did forget about that. Also later that year, Munakata Misai enlists. Also later that year, Isumi Michiru appointed captain of the Special Task Force Squadron A01. So Isumi was training for another 3 years before she actually got assigned to the Special Task Force. Okay. Later that year, Operation Lucifer and Reclamation of Honshu. Okay. The second largest counteroffensive of the war thus far, after Operation Palaiologos. Okay, so Operation Palaiologos. Wasn't that... No, that wasn't what the Rain Dancers took place in. That was after that, because they referenced that. What was Operation Palaiologos? Whatever. Conducted by UN and Koshan forces, UN-affiliated U.S. troops detonate 2 G-bombs to neutralize the Yokohama Hive without notifying Imperial or Koshan troops in advance. Oh! I did not know that. They did it without notifying anyone in advance. That's... Oof. That's risque. That's a hefty yikes, quite actually. Alright. Also later that year, Kosuke Yuko proposes the new Yokohama base, receives immediate approval to construct new UN base atop the ruins of the Yokohama Hive to serve as Alternative 4's primary research facility. And then in the year 2000, at the turn of the century, in Japan, the joint US-Japan TSF development project was approved. The Imperial Diet approves of a plan to upgrade the Type 94 Shiranui, hoping to learn more modern American TSF development techniques. Also in Japan, the first deployment of the Type 00 Takamikaze. In Europe, the first deployment of the EF-2000 Typhoon. Really? That was the first deployment of that. Wasn't that like... That was what these... Is that what one of these is going to be about? Because yeah, in Rain Dancers, they were like running the prototypes for the Typhoons. Is that what then one of these stories is going to maintain? Okay, this is from Muv-Luv Alternative Chronicles 2010. So I'm guessing if it's gonna probably be this one. Unique spin-off that offers a brief glimpse into one of the most prestigious TSF units there is, the Orbital Divers. Up high above Earth, one to make peace with these space reaction and full well might be thoughts of years. No, it doesn't seem like it. Also later that year, Munakata Misai was assigned to A01. And then Kazuma Toko enlists, and then of course 2001 in the US, the first deployment of the F-22A. Also later that year, Kazuma Toko was assigned to A01. Also later that year, Mitsurugi Meya, Sakaki Chizuru, Ayamine Kei, Tamase Miki, Yoru Mikoto, Suzumi Akane, and Kashiwagi Haruka enlist in the UN Takamura Yui Yuya Bridges stationed at Yukon Base. Okay, Yukon Base, I know that's to do with Total Eclipse. I know that from people talking about it online, total eclipse takes place in Alaska at this Yukon base. So whoever the fuck Takamura Yui, this group is, that has something to do with total eclipse, which I know absolutely nothing about. Also later that year, that's when Shirogane Takeda arrives. Also later that year, the attempted coup incident, the 12-5 incident. And then of course our last two stories take place on the same day, on Operation 21st, the day in which good old Isumi sacrificed herself for the good of the group. I know Inheritance has to do with her younger sister, and then apparently Chicken Divers also takes place during 21st. So without further ado, that's the end of the timeline. 2 more stories, and we're all wrapped up, and we're all caught up. So without further ado, Chicken Divers. I already read off the little description, so without further ado, click on it. Yeah, the intro. Let's start it up. Here in the Orbital Diver Corps, we have a name for veterans who come back for a third drop. We call them Chicken Divers. I wonder why. Please enlighten me. Altitude 500 kilometers. Low Earth orbit. UN Space Force Orbital Divers holding orbit. LE 521. Chicken Divers. Okay. Go on. I'm listening. I'm all alone in this cramped TSF cockpit. The place is as quiet as the grave. Aside from the low humming of the electronics, there's not a sound to be heard. My gloves are sodden with cold sweat. Wonder how many times I've shifted my grip on the control stick by now. 500 kilometers up in the air, flying in low Earth orbit. My god, that is a lot of fucking ships, isn't it? Sure seems like it. Did all those drop onto fucking Sadogashima? Because that seems like a lot. Stuffed into a re-entry shell, I stare at the pale Earth as it passes by above me. The view fills me with a familiar sense of dread as I wait to make my third drop. My hands are trembling. It's not like anyone can see me, but I've been trying to hide it by changing my grip on the control stick anyway. Words of self-mockery slipped out unconsciously. I'm a mess. A veteran in name only. At any rate, thinking someone's hot shit just because they made it to their third drop couldn't be more wrong. Best case scenario, orbital divers have a survival rate of around 20%. For every 100 new divers, about 80 die during their first drop. 16 bite the dust during their second. Nobody makes it through the third. Damn. We call new divers rookies, but they're far from it. Every one of them is handpicked from the ranks of veteran surface pilots. Those men and women, they're the real deal. Me, I'm nothing like them. Other than a small heater to stop the cockpit frosting over, there's nothing to keep me warm. Sure, the fortified suit keeps the worst of the cold at bay, but being able to see my breath like this pisses me off. Makes me feel like I'm lying in a damn morgue drawer. Doesn't help that the re-entry shell has a rather ominous nickname, the Flying Coffin. The re-entry destroyers that carry us used to be called flying bricks. Compared to our coffins that can only fly in one direction, though, they may as well have all the grace of a swan. A falling coffin, dropping down toward hell on earth. Yet beneath the heavy metal cloud, a lovely hive awaits. Re-entry cremation, crash landing burial, or a funeral pyre courtesy of the laser class. Not much point in picking my poison. Any of those options would render my corpse completely unidentifiable. You'd need a mop, not a body bag. I click my tongue and chastise myself, driving away those depressing thoughts. I've had it with them endlessly running through my mind. Re-entry shell status, monitor check. Communication systems normal. Life support systems all green. Orbital trajectory stable. No solar wind warnings. No contacts on the debris sensor. All systems nominal. This must be like the 100th time I've run a system check. All I can do to keep my sanity. Turning on a TSF's main engine without oxygen only wastes oxidizer. The destroyer provides just enough power for the bare essentials, communication and life support systems.
当面、俺たちの仕事はへその緒をたぐってみるのが関の山ってな。
There's really not much we can do from the time the coffin drops into the atmosphere till we hit the 2,000 meter and the outer shell is discarded. The handful of subthrusters can only make minor corrections to the descent trajectory and adjust the center of gravity. Damn, the nickname is a perfect fit. I'm really going to be like a corpse bouncing around inside a runaway coffin.
大原則化の姿勢制御。なあ、死んでもやる羽目にはなりたかねえんだが。
Should the heavy metal cloud density over the target drop below the UN Space Force's minimum acceptable level, I'll have no choice but to execute a Dutch roll once the lasers start blasting. Although I do have a trick up my sleeve, an emergency release of the heat-resistant anti-laser outer shell. It's standard operating procedure to keep it on until you reach 2,000 meters. Not that it would do much good anyway. Using the shell as a shield like that would only buy me a few seconds of safety. I'd be fried to a crispy brown by the second volley following afterwards. Descending stark, naked tends to do that to you. Flashbacks. Cold sweat breaks out all over my body as an image from the past flashes through my mind. I slowly wipe the sweat from my brow with the back of my glove. My mouth dries up, so I sip some water from the supply sack.
もう何度目だ。本気で初出撃の新任少尉様だな。
I take a deep, slow breath to fight off the vicious feedback loop of anxiety and fear.
夜を越えたか。
One of the secondary monitors bathes the cockpit in a pale blue light, reflecting my corpse-like visage on an auxiliary console. Damn! You a hunk! In this light, I barely even look alive. I can swear that's the face of a dead soldier staring back at me. Oh yeah, no, you're probably dead, but... like, listen, you ain't bad in the eyes, my man. At least you got that going for you. I know that definitely doesn't help you in the situation you're in, but, time slowly crawls by amid the hum of electronics. The blue earth on the monitor and the silent cockpit area make up the whole of my world. Solitude. I'm positioned in the middle of my wing, but we divers are isolated from the rest of the world until we descend into hell. Weirdly enough, reminding myself of everyone else in the same boat helps relieve my apprehension.
本当に一人になっちまったんだな。
Overhead, Eurasia slowly drifts by. Barely 30 years after Kashgar, 80% of the continent is under beta control. Might be from thousands of kilometers above, but seeing the Earth like this is a privilege reserved for the destroyer's crew and divers. Privilege, however, isn't the right word. It's a barren wasteland, pockmarked with craters like the surface of the moon. Who would want to see the world like that? The first time, I thought it was beautiful. The second time, I felt nothing but fear. And now, the third time.
ああ、この眺めに価値なんてね。そんなものはとっくに。
But despite that, even if certain death awaits, even though fear consumes us, there's no doubt that this is the land that gives us chickens, the courage and determination to volunteer for a third drop. That's right. I dropped at Lion. I think it's actually pronounced Leon, but whatever. I dropped at Mandalay. 96% of my comrades have died. Yikes. And it was all for nothing. We veterans survived by turning our backs on the hive and fleeing like cowards. Oh, I take you lost someone special, huh? Never again. I hadn't noticed, but my grip is tightened around the control stick. The fear is starting to subside. Yeah, now it's anger. 5,000 meters until the re-entry point. The time draws near. The moment the fleet commander plans to launch the all-out strike. Now is it a go or a no-go? The bomber fleet already dumped its payload. It's a go. It has to be. We're jumping for sure. I wet my lips. With fleeting glances, I eye the dimly lit console on the side. When I see my reflection, I no longer find a dead man staring back. Instead, I see a coward. A shadow of a man licking his lips. Just what am I fighting for? Atonement? Revenge? Recognition? With a grim smile, I wait for the commander's orders.
諸君、 Operation Sadogashima は順調に推移。
Oh yeah, is it?
前回所定通りの再突入に備えよ。
It's going just wonderfully. No issues at all.
第2から第4までの戦隊は
I'm sure everything will go over just smoothly. Showtime. My grim smile widens into a broad smirk. Overhead, we pass the Caribbean Sea. The homeland of those Yankee bastards who send us to our deaths comes into view. It's a pity those arrogant assholes get to live there, but it's one of the few places on Earth that remains pristine. Shining city on a hill we must preserve. My mind snaps into orbital diver mode. The mission's the only thing that matters.
マザーグースよりアクイラス。聞いての通りよ。オールノミナル。
アクイラ1オールステートグリーン全装備固定完了ノーモア AKJ
アクイラ2オールステートノミナル全装備固定完了。早くしないとちびりそうだよマザー。
Maza?
マンマよりアクイラス。強化装備にたっぷりちびっとけ。多い日も安心よ。
If you have to pee, it's okay. Conversation breaks the silence for the first time in hours. Casual banter eases the tension. Mother Goose 1 is our point of contact in the destroyer, carrying the Akias. She's the only one we divers can talk to in real time.
すっかり下ネタも通じなくなったなマザー。 俺は
Piss all over my joke. Screwing around like this is the only entertainment we've got left. Even Mother Goose doesn't have much to do, other than checking our status. As for us, playing block puzzles with a few supply packs we can stuff into this coffin grows old faster than you'd expect. There's no need to be all business all the time. Not that all business is an accurate description of us. If a certain urban legend repeated among divers as if it were gospel is anything to go by. AKG, Attack of the Killer Juice. There's a story all divers worth their salt know, but a guy who supposedly died from a loss of flight control after a carton of orange juice stuck under his seat ruptured during the deceleration and caused a short. Pretty morbid stuff, but also pretty funny. Jesus. Sounds ridiculous at first glance, but it's actually plausible. When we drop, we're nowhere near as graceful as the destroyer. The coffin can hit up to a maximum of 8.2 Gs during deceleration. It's a small amount, but 300 milliliters of liquid under 8 times the normal amount of pressure can have rather regrettable consequences.
再確認よ。放課後の集結予定地点はマウントオースカート。ま、もともと膠着可能エリアの前後マージンは5キロとないからね。ベテランらしいピンポイント効果に期待してるわ。
軽く言ってくれるなリーナ。
あのねアンリとアクイラワン
Henry?
あなたたちに無理なら
Name's Henry?
後ろのひよっこは文字通りフライドチキンになるだけよ。軽くやってもらうしかない
Your
わ。
tender butts will become chicken tendies. Even if the re-entry shell wipes out all enemies from the surface and the TSF lands successfully, we still need to regroup before the enemy herds return. If we don't, we'll be isolated and overrun. Any diver group unable to form at least a company-sized unit should link up with nearby divers. We've been trained to do that, obviously, but most divers want to fight beside the people they know.
へいへいマザーご加盟とあらば軽くやってみせやしょう。
ふんわりカラッと。フライドチキンはお任せくださいマザー。
Yeah, I didn't like that one either.
頼んだわよ。
Lieutenant Rina Tervo. This is only the third time I've worked with her, but I've seen her face countless times in simulator training. It's become a reassuring sight. Both myself, Henry Gietzen, and my buddy, Lieutenant Axel Bjorker, have been hurled out by Rina twice before, still alive and kicking. Okay, so y'all are clearly of European descent for sure. There's no way you have names like Henry Gietzen and Axel Bjorker and be fucking Japanese. I'm guessing Scandinavian of some sort. Our walking, talking, good luck charm is the best company we could ask for.
第6機動航海兵団前期所定通りの再突入を開始せよ。
再突入許可確認。本艦機動離脱噴射まで
Let's
3
go.
アンビリカルコネクタ開放に備え戦術機各員は全系統切り替え状況を確認せよ。
The reentry shell switches supply modes, from using the destroyer's energy to its own built-in power source.
アクイラ1よりマザーグース1全系統切り替え確認再突入カーゴの操縦治療準備よし。
接続パージ完了了解。カーゴ制御切り替え完了。
アクイラマン I have control.
Our coffins, the two armored capsules inserted in a re-entry cargo shell, are the smallest combat elements able to dive using the re-entry shell system. Having the cargo controls transferred over to us marks the first stage of the drop.
制御切り替え完了確認。コネクタパージ。
アクイラマンパーチ確認オールグリーン。
アクイラ2コネクタパージオールグリーン。
The umbilical cable that was supplying us with power, oxygen, and communications has been severed. Now we are truly on our own.
本艦軌道離脱噴射まで102頼んだわよ。アクイラス。
Mother Goose forces out a strained farewell. The cracks in her voice aren't because we've switched to wireless comms now. All the playfulness is gone, replaced with earnest distress. It's understandable. Hers is a grim and thankless task. Out of all the orbital divers the operators send off, only 20% return. Most of the pilots she's carried are dead. Chickens might joke about what fate holds in store for us. That's not to say we take death lightly. We fight to honor those who came before us, dropped into their graves. That's why even though the chances of surviving a third time are impossibly low, we drop again. Because we intend to carry on where they left off. Damn.
答えるべきは今か。
The second startup sequence for the cockpit controls finishes, and the light drives away the solitude and self-mockery.
了解。軌道離脱噴射スタンバイ。言われるまでもねマザー。
軌道離脱噴射スタンバイ。まずビーチからハガキを送るから待ってろよ。
The third drop. Everything has been for this moment.
佐渡島だかなんだか知らねえが今度こそは。
This will be no gentle re-entry. Those times are long gone. The moon? Mars? In the old days, when space flights to the moon bases were a national enterprise, safety during re-entry was one of the primary concerns. That's no longer the case. A 99.99999% survivability rate is a pipe dream. Re-entry shells only have a functional reliability of 91%. For every 100 divers, 9 won't even make it to the ground. Acceptable odds for the forces fighting the Beta. Not like anybody's complaining, since an attack spearheaded by divers is much more efficient than a pure land assault. Altitude's 120 kilometers. Our beloved atmosphere starts to caress the outer shell. At last, it's game time. The hour of our descent into Gehenna is here. Whether we'll ascend into heaven again is a question for another time. There's no further communication from Mother Goose. Time for talking is way past. With merciless punctuality, the electric signal from the orbital control system releases the final bolt connecting us to the destroyer. Hell
リエ
yeah.
ントリーシェル分量確認。カゴ地性安定。相変わらずニューでしてるぜリーナ。
足りねえよ。俺たちのマザーに敬礼だ。
We give a brief farewell to Mother Goose. Maybe we'll meet again if we live through this day. That's no longer a concern. The 20% survival rate has completely disappeared from my mind.
さて、シベリア上空高度80キロ。そろそろ来るぜ。
Killa too is wearing a smile on his face, but it's clear he's on edge. As what a real chicken must feel moments before becoming part of the menu. Eurasia extends beneath us, an acropolis of towering hives, putting us in the effective range of any heavy laser class nearby. However, for some reason we aren't being fired upon. Experience from previous operations tells us what to expect. Being so exposed still gives me the shakes. I've never understood why they don't attack us. We're within their range, but besides fire from our target hive, there's no lasers incoming.
毎度ながら奴らの思考は虫けら並みだな。お隣さんを助けようって気がないのは助かるな。
ああ、でもな、その虫けらにやられてる人類は脳みそばかりのクソ虫以下だろ。
I mean,
いいね、クソ虫。虫けら同士の殴り合いだ。
いやいや、まったくだ。奴らの頭上にたっぷりとクソを垂れてやれ。
さあ、イエスさあ。ケツが裂けるほどたっぷりだ。
butt cheeks fully spread, payload ready to deploy. Fuck that, I'm taking a screenshot of that. That's just like a perfect out of context clip. I fucking love it. Sir, yes sir, butt cheeks fully spread, payload ready to deploy. This ridiculous banter helps psych ourselves up for the coming battle. Talking shit with a wingmate does wonders for your mental condition. Having a buddy around makes all the difference. Once we drop below 60 kilometers, the atmosphere will thicken rapidly. The destroyer would begin to slow down around here, not our coffins. No, they fly in the face of such common sense, plummeting straight into the middle of the beta herds. This ability to bypass the enemy's defenses is what makes sending orbital divers worth it. Fuck yeah! I'm about it. Let's go. Uniting the rockets negates the deceleration from atmospheric contact. The massive impact from forcing our way through rattles my skull. We're hurling through the atmosphere, heading for the hive on an express elevator to hell. The force of deceleration decreases. Now it feels like my ass is floating again. Even though our backs face the earth to better withstand the deceleration, the image projected from the retinal camera shows what's in front of us. Dropping toward the planet at terminal velocity makes all rookie divers piss themselves. Some even faint from the sheer terror of it. Of course, the fortified suit automatically gives the newbies a shock to wake them up. They're forced to face their fear head on again. Due to the strain deceleration puts on the heart, stimulants are prohibited. Taking sedatives, which dull the reflexes, would be unthinkable. An orbital diver must be willing, both body and mind, to finish the journey with their own strength. One can grow used to this by the third time. Aquila 2's jokes are proof enough. However, the real danger is from what comes next. Because fear is only psychological. At this stage, 9 out of 100 coffins with malfunction disintegrate in midair. Good thing death happens in an instant, so there's no time to dread the Reaper coming. The rest of us, though, won't be so lucky. This velocity is intended to protect us from the hives below. There's nothing compared to the pure horror of the 8.2 Gs of deceleration waiting for us at the end of this drop. The last lock bolt connecting our cargo shell and our armored capsules fires off. We begin our heavy deceleration to prepare for landing. But for us divers, that's just the start. At the same time, the shell continues on ahead of us to strike the hive. That's the Diver Corps' way of saying hi to our beta friends. Plenty of red-hot metal boxes have been dropped, opening up countless holes in the stab, like a series of gargantuan leaks on the roof. If we don't get down there ourselves, it'll all be for nothing. Goddamn. My eyeballs sink into my skull. Even my vision grows dim. My body's forced back into the seat. I can't even move a single finger. Doesn't matter. I must keep my grip on the control stick at all costs. If you get hit by lasers, the only option left is forcing the capsule into a Dutch roll. Back when I was on standby, just thinking of doing that again made me break out in a cold sweat. That's the only way of shifting the center of gravity without propellant. You'd have to fly by the seat of your pants, riding the flames like surfing on top of a meteor. It's the last thing I want, but at that point, I'd have no choice, so I can't let myself faint. Need to stay conscious, just in case. I won't black out, no matter the pain. Almost there. Almost at the hive. Going to smash it, blow a hole wide open in those monsters' heads until we've paid them back for every single man, woman, and child who has died in Eurasia. Yeah, no, this man's got a personal vendetta. Understandable. It's been a while since I last felt this sense of liberation. The intimately familiar sound of the F-15E Strike Eagle's engines fills me with energy. We confirm each other's locations with the now active data link. Ensure we're on track for landing at our designated positions. This part could easily go wrong. Get jumpy and overcorrect the approach vector during landing, and you'll end up shit creek without a paddle.
よし、その無駄口は確かに貴様に違いねえ。降下地点をポイント B4 に設定。接近合流しつつ最終降下だ。
アクイラ2了解。エアブレーキ展開開始。間もなくレーダーアウト。
I complete the final alignment with my wingman in the 10 seconds before the opening of the outer shell, and our re-entry into the heavy metal cloud. Once we're inside the cloud, sensors and communications are, for all intents and purposes, disabled until we get out of the zone.
レーザー級全滅。手分けにはいかなかったみたいだな。
TSFs aren't meant to fly at supersonic speeds. Unless you quickly decelerate to an airspeed where the machine can maneuver again, the automatic evasion systems won't work.
運転までに音速域に減速。最後の10メートルでスラストリバース。いつも通りだ。落ち着けよ、アンディ。
The drop's final minute. Having come this far, we now have to survive the final stretch, plunging into laser fire buck naked without the shales. This is where countless divers will perish. This rocket coaster ride wreaks havoc on our bodies and minds. If we survive, we'll need some serious time off afterwards. Metal particles cover the whole sky. Dim light filters through, like the sun piercing the thunderheads of a storm. The preceding orbital bombardment riddled the ground with craters, making it resemble the surface of the moon. A monument looms, shining dull and black. It's a familiar sight by now, that massive towering structure. The Hive, symbol of beta domination, a landmark that stands for humanity's defeat. A colossal gravestone for countless divers, one that stands in mockery of our efforts, almost as if taunting us chickens who fled before. Data link recovered. Battlefield intel confirmed. Allied markers. As the familiar voices chime in over the open channel, my mindset switches from one of a lone diver to that of a squadron commander. Damn. Whoa, raising my guy. We're only the tip of the spear. Yeah, and ultimately, yeah. Many have paid the price in blood to get us here. Divers, pilots, sailors. Okay, this is where we pay them back. This is where we show them their sacrifices were worth it. I'm well into my third game of Russian roulette. The fourth, I'll think about later. My hands are no longer trembling. With our mission, this sole thing on our minds, we charge into the Valley of Death. Yeah, and obviously they don't survive that. Yeah, I figured that was going to be a shorter one. I think they were slightly mentioned in alternative. Back when everything was going well, I think they did mention the divers going into the Hive. But then that's when everything started rising up out of the ground and shit went south really quick. Something along those lines anyway. I believe. But yeah. Zen! This is the same guy who voiced, what was his name? Winston. Oh shit. Yep. Communicate with the orbital diver core has been completely cut off. Yep. Okay, so they're just showing us exactly, who that was. Yep, and then of course. Yeah. A single member of the 6th Orbital Diver Corps lived through the Battle of Sadogashima. Due to the detonation of a G-bomb, none of the survivors could be rescued. This orbital drop holds the record for the worst result in history. 0 returnees. The Aquilas would not die for a 4th time. Yeah. It is interesting to get a little look into that backstory, though. Because, yeah, that's something where it's never really touched on. Like, we saw a little bit of how that worked during Operation Cherry Blossom when all of the Valkyries, well, essentially Squad 207, there really weren't much Valkyries involved. Like, technically they were still part of the Valkyries, of course, but, like, all the original members of the Valkyries were either dead or wounded. But yeah, we saw a little bit of how it all worked, but seeing, everything behind it, and honestly, that only goes to prove how much of a miracle it is that, Operation Cherry Blossom turned out the way it was, because if I remember correctly, like, yeah, all of everyone in 207, obviously, except Takeru, Sumika, and Kasumi, dropped the same way these guys did, if I'm remembering correctly. So, yeah. Just goes to show the fact that all of them made it out of that, like, they're incredibly lucky in that alone. But yeah, no, this one was interesting. See, that's the thing, like, this one had, like, it felt relevant. It felt like it had a point to it, like, to show you a little bit about backstory behind the orbital divers. Whereas with Rain Dancers, I still just don't see the point in it. Like, why was that story necessary for us to know? Once again, I think it ties back to Total Eclipse. If I had, like, any information on Total Eclipse, I'd probably be like, oh, okay, this is a neat little, backstory thing, oh, these people were this person was mentioned in Total Eclipse, therefore now seeing their backstory is kind of interesting. I mean, maybe, but I still don't get it. But anyway, that's gonna do it for Chicken Divers. I think this is probably like the shortest, the shortest story of them all that I've played. Even counting the extra episodes. Like, this was a short one, but it was good. It was good. I liked it. But with that being said, only one left. So in the next video, we'll start that one up. Till then, peace.